this holds true for marketing and branding and many different things, but you have to be committed if you're going to see growth.
Hello, and welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, today's special guest is Dr. Saba Motakef. He's a board-certified plastic and reconstructive surgeon in private practice in Anaheim, California, for the past 4 years. Now, Dr. Motakef earned his medical degree from Albany Medical College and completed his residency in plastic surgery at Loma Linda University Medical Center. He has published numerous clinical studies and lectures at local, regional, and international conferences. He also participates in medical trips to Haiti, Peru, and China. Dr. Motakef, welcome to Beauty and the Biz.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell me, did you do a fellowship anywhere?
I did not.
No
No.
kidding.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know you didn't have to. I always thought you had to do your residency and then go into a fellowship for 1 year or go into academia for 1 year and then go to private. What did you do after residency?
So I actually looked at aesthetic fellowships really, really seriously. I interviewed at a few. I went out and visited some of them, and I was really strongly considering doing an aesthetic fellowship. But I ended up pulling out of the aesthetic fellowship match after having gone on a few interviews and kind of scoping things out because I felt that the training that we got at Loma Linda University was very strong, and I think that holds true for most plastic surgery programs in the US and in California. Our aesthetic training is, I think, very strong. And I didn't feel like I needed that extra year. And so I dove right into private practice after I graduated.
That's amazing. Usually the fellowship, if you do a strong fellowship, the part you learn is the business and marketing part. You know,
Right.
and you have the surgical skills. You didn't get any of the business or the marketing. So it's so great to watch a mentor. How did they grow their practice? How did they handle staffing issues? So that's really interesting. And then to go from that, did you have any business experience at all?
Not really. I had some management experience from, before medical school, but I never really started my own business. So a lot of it for me was trial and error.
Okay. How did you pick a location?
Well, I trained here in Southern California, and I was actually born and raised in Orange County. So I always kind of had my eyes on Orange County. And when I was looking at sort of, more saturated areas and different areas where I felt there was more of a need for a plastic surgeon, I kind of settled on North OC. And if you look at a map of Orange County, you'll see a huge cluster of plastic surgeons, Newport Beach and then South OC. And then you'll have some kind of in Central OC, but then there's this big gap that I thought I saw between South OC and the Inland Empire. And I said, that area needs a plastic surgeon. And I was familiar with the area. I grew up not too far from here. So I had a good sense for the demographics and whatnot. And so we decided to literally rent out a suite and hang up a shingle and start a practice here in 2020.
And then where are you doing surgery?
So I practice in Anaheim, and I do most of my surgeries in Ontario, California, at Inland Breast and Body Surgery Center.
And is it a very far commute for the patients?
It's about 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes, depending on traffic. It's a fantastic surgery center. It was actually established by one of my mentors, someone who I've really kept in close contact with since I've completed my training. And it's a really fantastic cosmetic surgery specialty center. And so I kind of dabbled and taken cases to a few other centers and before settling on Inland Breast and Body. And I sometimes get patients who are like, that's kind of far. I need to drive 30 minutes or 40 minutes on the morning of my surgery. And the way I put it to them is, listen, imagine you're a Formula One, race car driver, and you're going to operate with a different team every week. It's just not going to work if you have a different pit crew every week, I should say. And whereas when I go to Ontario, I have the same scrub tech, the same nurse, the same staff, day in, day out, the same anesthesia providers. And I think that's how we're really able to operate at a high level. Some of the other surgery centers that I'd worked at before, the issue that I had was I was working with different staff going from 1 week to the next. And When you're doing some of the more specialized things, I do a lot of fat transfer procedures, vaso liposuction, high definition liposuction, things like that. You really need a team that really has those processes dialed in. And I feel like I got that in Ontario. So even though it's a little bit of a commute for me and my patients, I think it's totally worth it.
Okay, I just did some math. You started practice in the middle of COVID, or during COVID, or what happened there?
Yeah, it was right in the heart of COVID, and it was I graduated from residency in July or June of 2020, and COVID kind of started in March of 2020, right? So that was one of the things that was really weighing on me as I started my practice. I was like, wow, this is the worst time possible to start an aesthetic, private practice. But everything worked out. It actually turned out to be a gangbusters year for aesthetic surgery in general. The economy did great, and we were very busy very quickly. So back then, we were all wearing face masks in clinic, and every patient had to sign a COVID-19, consent and things like that. So things were a little different back then, but it all worked out.
And then were you living off a Recon, or were you sticking with the cosmetic, or doing a balance?
I dove right into cosmetic, and I had spoken to some friends, and the advice they gave me is if you see yourself doing cosmetic long term, then just do that and focus on that. So from day one, my practice has been pretty much 99% cosmetic. I'll do maybe 1 or 2 reconstructive cases a year, just sort of for hospital privileges, but otherwise my practice is 99% cosmetic.
Nice. And how lean is it, or how are you doing the building the empire, or are you doing more boutique style?
I would say a little bit of both, honestly. I think, the boutique, I don't think you ever want to lose sight of that kind of boutique approach. At least that's how I feel, in terms of creating that patient experience and the approach that you take to those types of cases. But of course, I want to build the empire. And I don't think you can build the empire or operate at a very high level if you're not busy. That's kind of, one of the things that I feel like I've taken away from all this. It's hard to you can't be a boutique from day one. I think you have to perform a high volume of cases within reason, of course. We're not talking about doing 3 or 4 BBLs a day, but I think in order to operate at a high level, you have to operate at a high volume.
How important is the non-surgical side of your practice, or are you totally focused on surgery?
So I myself, I'm totally focused on surgery. I no longer perform, Botox fillers and things like that. We have a fantastic nurse injector, Kim, and she does all the Botox, the fillers, clear and brilliant lasers. We have a great esthetician on our team as well, who's doing skincare services and lymphatic massage and things like that. So it's definitely a pretty big chunk of our revenue that's the non-surgical side of things. But fortunately, I've been able to distance myself a little bit from those types of procedures as the surgical side of our practice has really ramped up.
And have they been a good feeder for surgery? Have those girls been good about sending the patients your way when they need more than a
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Botox patients will, commonly end up in a consult for an upper bleph or for a facelift or maybe a ablative, laser resurfacing, which I like to do in the operating room. So yeah, it's been a great resource. Probably a really growing part of our practice as well has been semaglutide and the weight management program. And that's just been massive for our practice because in the past, I have a BMI cutoff of 30 for my patients. And in the past, if someone came in at a BMI of 34, 35, I would say, I'm sorry, I can't really help you. Or we'd set some weight loss goals. And, most of those patients would never come back, unfortunately. But today, we get those patients on semaglutide. We kind of keep them in the practice until they reach their weight loss goals. And then we can perform their surgery once they've gotten to BMI of 30 or below. And the surgeries are safer, the patients are happier, the results are better, and we maintain those patients in our practice. I think the retention for patients in my practice, before semaglutide, who were maybe a BMI of 34, 35 and had to reach a weight loss goal, maybe 5 or 10% of patients would come back
Mm.
uh, before semaglutide. But now I would say 80 or 90% of those patients will eventually reach their goals and get the surgery that they wanted.
Well, one of the best parts of that service is you're not so involved in it.
Mhm.
It's a very nice kind of hands-off profit center for you.
Yeah.
Does it take more staff than just Kim, or is she able to handle that and the injectables?
Kim does it. We have a nurse practitioner as well who
Mm.
manages some of that stuff. But you know what, they do their initial consultation with me, and then they'll come in once a month. They'll do a weight check. We'll make sure there's no major side effects, and based on their weight, we'll decide if they want to go up or go down on their dose. And most of that can be handled by either Kim or a nurse practitioner. Of course, they'll run that by me, but it becomes a conversation that takes a couple minutes rather than an entire patient visit once a month.
Is there any downside to offering that? Because it sounds really good, because I know all sorts of plastic surgeons who say, "Come on back when you've lost your last 10 pounds." And frankly, they're they're never going to do it on their own. I
I
say
know.
give them resources, at least give them like, an app that helps them or something. But now we have even a better solution. At least it sounds like it. Is there any downside to it?
Honestly, I think it's a win-win. I think no matter how you slice it, semaglutide's a game changer. It
Mm.
takes patients who may not have normally been a candidate for surgery and it makes them a candidate. It's also created this whole new population of patients who've now reached their weight loss goals. And as they've reached their goals, they're realizing, okay, well, now I have some loose skin on my arms, or, my breasts have started to sag, or I'm beginning to notice some more loose skin on my neck now that I've lost 30, 40, or 50 pounds. So not only has it helped to retain higher BMI patients that we would normally send away, and it's made those patients good candidates for surgery, it's also taken this whole other pool of patients who may not have even considered plastic surgery in the first place, and it's made them patients who are now strongly considering surgery because as they've reached their goals, they've noticed loose skin and other issues that they want to have addressed. So I think it's a huge win. I think there's very little downside to it. And when I describe these medications to patients, I tell them, I mean, this may sound melodramatic or exaggerated, but I think these medications in 100 years, we're going to look back and say, wow, that was just as big as, the polio vaccine or, the discovery of some other major medical breakthroughs in the last 100 years. And I think when you think about the fact that the majority of Americans are overweight, and a lot of the problems that we run into from a health perspective are can be weight related or related to chronic diseases, which can be related to being overweight, like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, etc. I think it's an absolute game changer.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, that's not one of my problems, but boy, have I heard so many patients seem to be on it or were on it or gonna get
Mhm.
on it. It's so popular. If you're gonna buy stock, I love to watch stocks, and they say
Yeah,
that's a good one. That's a keeper."
absolutely. Yeah, Eli Lilly, is that the company?
That one that's in, Sweden or something. The one that's starting,
Yes, I
uh
think I heard about that
yeah,
one.
I didn't do it. I didn't do that one, but, anyway, what would you say is the biggest challenge to running a practice from scratch and just starting out? What was the biggest challenge?
I mean, there's a few different things. Can I give you two or three
Yep,
or
please.
four? Um, well, I would say the startup costs are big. Just getting on your feet, and it's daunting, right? Getting on your feet, signing a lease, buying the equipment, that's very daunting, and that's a huge challenge in itself. And this is all for someone who's just finishing up their training. It becomes even more daunting trying to do all that because you're worried about boards. You're worried about that case you have in a week that it's going to be the first time you've ever done it by yourself. So I think that's one challenge. There's obviously a huge, startup cost to starting a private practice, although I don't think it's as big as most people think.
Mm.
Um, I would say marketing is a massive challenge. Okay, you've built your practice and you've set it up, where are the patients going to come from? And especially if you're in a competitive marketplace, I think it can be very difficult to differentiate yourself and draw some of those patients to your practice. Three, I would say staffing is a massive challenge, if not the biggest challenge. And, there were definitely some growing pains, in terms of finding the right, team and building the right team to do what we wanted to do.
Hello there. Quick pause to ask you if you have gaps in your practice draining your time, profits, and peace of mind. If so, I can help you streamline, grow, and take the guesswork out of your practice. Book your practice growth strategy review at catherinemaley.com and let's turn those gaps into growth. Now, back to the podcast. Well, most surgeons start with that one person who thankfully ends up being like they're the front desk, the office manager, the coordinator,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
everything. Did you have one of those people, or did you bring on your wife, or how'd you work that?
So you're gonna laugh. When I started my private practice, my mother-in-law was my office manager and my patient care coordinator. And I had friends that were like, "Your mother-in-law's gonna do all that for
Wow.
you?"
You got along that well with your mother-in-law?
We get along that well.
Nice.
So, and she's brilliant. She's very smart. She used to work for NASA and JPL, and so she's fantastic at what she does. And she did great, and she basically worked for free, for the first year or so. And then eventually we got to a place, obviously, where we could, grow and hire some other staff who could kind of fill that role. And we went through some growing pains. We went through, three or four, renditions of, hiring and recruiting and whatnot. And I'm fortunate to say the team that we have now in the office have all been here for, 2 years or so. And they're really, really fantastic group.
Any tips on how you hired the right people or figured out who were the wrong people? Any tips on that?
It's tough because I think it's so hard to tease out in a 15 or 20-minute interview if this person's going to be the right fit. And um, some of the people that didn't eventually stay on, they weren't bad, but they just weren't the right fit. We just were kind of on a different, wavelength, and it didn't work out. And I think it's very hard to kind of uh do a 15, 20-minute interview and say, yeah, he or she's going to be the one that's going to fill that role and be a rock star. So to a certain extent, I think you interview a bunch of people, you look for people who have experience. Obviously, I think that's big. But eventually you just have to roll the dice and see what happens. And it either works or it doesn't. And my office manager now, I was getting a haircut, and I was venting to my barber. And she's like, I know someone really good. I know someone who would probably, fit into that role, that, because I was kind of, discussing some of my struggles with the patient care coordinator, office manager role. And she was an esthetician. She's a hustler. She would be esthetician by day, she would wait tables at night, and stuff like that. And but otherwise she hadn't worked in a plastic surgery practice before. But we met, and I just had that kind of that sixth sense that, this is going to work. She's going to be really good. So we took a chance with her, and she's been absolutely fantastic. I would say pretty much everyone who's at my office now, you can trace them back to Kelsey, in some way. So she's done all the hiring since, and she's, basically recruited the MA, the nurse injector, the esthetician, even our social media manager, marketing, you can trace back to Kelsey in some way or the other. So once we found that person, it all kind of clicked into place. And I think we're able to build a team that really just kind of gelled. But it took a lot of trial and error to get there. And I wish I had a better solution, but I think you just have to interview and take a chance and trust your gut, trust your intuition, and eventually you'll find the right group. Um, I think there's a quote from, is it Tony Robbins? I've heard, the number one mistake in business is hiring too quickly and firing too slowly. Have you heard that one?
I used to follow him big time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, and it's very, very true.
If you wanted my 2 cents, I would say, you need more than 15 minutes and you need some repetition. So,
Yeah.
when I hire people, I call them, I text them, I email them, I DM them,
Mhm.
and I need them to keep showing up. Like, okay, we're gonna meet at 1 o'clock on Zoom. We're gonna,
Right.
text me tomorrow morning before 9. Like, I like to
Mhm.
just do a lot of those points of contact because
Yeah.
you'll get a feel for, first of all, are they any good at technology? And
Right.
do they understand when I say 1 o'clock, I mean 1 o'clock? I don't mean
Mhm.
1:10, I mean 1 o'clock, you know?
Are they responsive? That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about some of the hires that didn't work out, and I'm like, it was taking a day for, them to get back to me with every email. I should have seen, I should have picked up on that early on.
We don't. We
Yeah.
don't until just raw experience,
Mhm.
teaches you that. And then you're just trying to find like, how can I do this sooner? How do I get there a lot sooner, with all the mistakes? What would you say is the biggest mistake you made so far? And it's not a mistake, it's just feedback, you know?
Biggest mistake that I've made so far from like a practice administrative perspective, two things come to mind. I think going cheap. When you're starting out, you're thinking, I don't want to sign this big contract. I don't want to, you want to conserve as much money as possible because you're trying to get your feet off the ground and kind of build something, and so you don't want to spend a ton of money, and so you go cheap on stuff, and then you realize that you know, you saw no growth as a result of that. And, worst case scenario, you're going to have to spend even more money to fix it, and get things right. And it's similar to what we tell patients in plastic surgery, right? Get it right the first time, The same thing can apply to marketing, reputation management, branding, things like that. Because, if a patient goes out and gets a surgery and they get a result and they come to me now for a breast aug revision where they're going to need a plane change and mesh and God knows what else. It becomes a very expensive, very involved endeavor. And the same thing applies to business. And I think there's, this natural impulse to try to, keep your costs as low as possible. But, I think you have to take the leap and you have to spend some money and you have to trust the process because things will work out. And if you go cheap in the beginning, you're probably going to be back to square one in a few months and spending a lot more money to fix it. So I went cheap on things like marketing early on. I flushed a bunch of money down the toilet and I said, all right, well, I don't, with Google Ads, for example, something as simple as, you know, um, not reaching that critical threshold or not spending enough money basically to reach that critical threshold where your ads are going to get noticed and you're going to get the clicks. You might as well flush that money down the toilet at that point, I would say. And I see this when I have friends reach out to me and they're thinking about setting up a website or doing some marketing and and they ask me how I did those things and they're like, that's way too expensive. I don't want to do that or I can't do that. And I feel like you kind of have to, otherwise you're gonna end up spending a lot more money. So I'd say going cheap on some things was one of the mistakes that I made in the beginning, and I learned that one the hard way. I also think staying committed is really important. And this holds true for marketing and branding and many different things, but you have to be committed if you're going to see growth. If you're going to start, for example, someone reached out to me recently and they said, okay, well, how did you tell me about this marketing thing that you did? And I told them about it. And they said, all right, I'm going to try it for a couple months. I'll see how it goes. But you're not going to see results in 2 months. You're not going to see results in 3 months. You probably need at least 6 to 12 months, I think, to gauge a response to some of these things that you do. So I think you have to spend the money and you have to be committed to a long-term kind of relationship in order to see the results and for that relationship to sort of bear fruit. So I would say those are the two mistakes I made in the beginning. I would sign up for a marketing thing. I would do it for a month or two. I would say, this isn't working. And I would cancel and I'd move on to the next. And I probably spent about a year doing this before my mindset kind of shifted a little bit. And I started to stick around. And I realized when I start to establish those types of relationships, and I kind of stayed more committed in the long haul, that's when we really start to see growth.
The surgeons hate losing money, but the funny thing is, because it's a mindset shift for sure, you
Mhm.
ha instead of looking at it as, "I'm gonna give away all this money,"
Right.
you
Yeah.
have to really look around and say, "Wait a second, what am I getting for that?"
Yeah.
Like, could I po and forget this 10 to 1 ROI. Whoever says that,
Yeah.
it's not true anymore. It's just not.
Mm.
It's too competitive. But if you could even, like, even half the time break even, I mean, you want more than that, but even if you break even, but you have a long tail patient who comes back again and again,
Mhm.
brings their friends and gives you a good review,
Right.
like, just start thinking of not just what you're gonna lose in money, but what are you gonna gain on the other end? Because then, on the other hand, you're so afraid of losing money, yet You'll spend
Mhm.
$150,000 on a laser that somebody told you this is the biggest money maker in the world, and then
Right.
and you don't hesitate to give them 150 grand. And I think, really? That was your big money maker? Like, how's that working out for you? And everyone
Exactly.
says, oh, well, it didn't exactly sell itself. Well, no, because somebody's got to market the thing. I just get so, it's so frustrating because I'm also a business owner and I hate to give
Mhm.
away money, but I have
Mhm.
to turn around and say, wait a second, is this going to grow my practice or
Mhm.
grow my business or not? And stop fiddling with it.
Stop fiddling with it.
Yeah,
Stop.
you'll
Just
keep
set it
changing
and
everything.
let them do their thing, and then you can reassess the results in 6 to 12 months.
That's why I want you to put a bunch of poles in the pond. Like, don't put that one silver bullet in, like, "This is it. This is my big silver bullet." And then you, like, let sit and wa it's almost like I'm growing a little plant and you keep digging it up. "Hey, are you growing yet?" And it's like,
Exactly. Let me
"Yes."
check the roots. Let me see.
So
There is no that brings me to another thing. There is no silver bullet.
yeah, there
And
isn't.
again, I had a friend reach out to me a week ago, and he said, "Dude, what are you doing for marketing?
What's that one thing you're doing?
What's that one thing exactly?" That's a question I get a lot.
Yeah,
It's not one thing.
yeah.
It's not one thing. I think the way it works is you have to do a little bit of everything, literally everything, because it's not like the patient said, "Oh, I saw, Dr. Motakef in, I don't know, I saw his feature in this magazine, and that's when it clicked, and I said I'm going to book with them." It's not it that never happens. I think what happens is maybe they research surgeons, maybe they've stumbled on your page, then they end up on your social media, then maybe they're doing some more research and they see an article about you in a magazine, or they see one of your social media posts, or they see something in a forum, even Reddit. I had a patient recently who said she read about us on Reddit, and that's how she found our practice. So I think it's sort of a bunch of different things that will kind of fill that bucket until eventually that patient gets to the tipping point, and then they're there and they say, okay, I think I'm going to book the consult now, and I'm going to come in, and then your consult will hopefully solidify things for you. But it's not one thing. You have to do a little bit of everything for that patient to get to the tipping point. It's very rare that someone comes in for one thing, unless it's word of mouth. Word of mouth could be the one thing, but if you're a young practice, it takes time to build that up.
Even if it's word of mouth, they still went to your Instagram, they still went to your
Absolutely.
website, they still looked at your reviews, they looked at your photos. It takes a whole plan,
Yeah.
and stop messing with it. But make sure you're doing all of it too. Like,
Mhm.
don't let so many surgeons like, oh, I don't get around to the photos. It's a pain in the neck. And I think photos are your brand. Like,
Yeah.
it's a priority. It's not a if we get around to it kind of thing anymore. You've gotta use everything you've got to stand out, you know? Nothing
Absolutely,
easy about that.
especially in a marketplace as competitive as ours and in the internet age when, they can compare your photos to someone else's. I mean, if you don't have photos up or if you only have 5 or 10, you know, that's gonna hurt you.
I still have surgeons say, "No, no," they, on their website, it says, "You'll need to come in to see the photos. Our patients, we respect their, privacy." And I think, "Okay, how's that working for you?"
Right,
You know, a
right.
patient's not gonna I need to see photos. I think all most of us cosmetic patients need to see the photos,
I would hope that any patient who comes in for a consult has spent, some time going through our before and afters.
right? So you said that you're gonna grow, you're working on a kingdom, or that's down the road, or what are your growth plans?
Growth plans, well, we haven't formally announced this yet, but we are expanding to a new location. That's gonna happen in 2025. Super excited
Nice.
about that. We just
How
closed
far are you
on
going?
not far.
Good.
And I shouldn't say it's a new location, but we're moving this location. We just closed down a medical building, so we're super, super excited. We're doing a bunch of renovations, mapping it out to be just a state-of-the-art clinic space and med spa. And so that's going to be the big thing for us for 2025. Not building a surgery center yet. That's a common question I get asked. To me, I think I've seen how much nuance there is to building a really, high quality, state of the art surgery center. And I'm more interested right now in really building our clinic space and our med spa, and growing that. And, we have a great surgery center that we work with now, and they're very good at what they do. So I'm going to let them do what they're good at, and I'll do what I'm good at. So
Is there any plan to build a treatment room where you can do some IV, low,
absolutely. Yeah.
awake, any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in-office procedures, yeah, things like that will definitely be doing things like that in the new space. IV stuff, we're definitely going to get involved in as well. My wife is a psychiatrist and she does a lot of IV treatments. She does IV ketamine for a number of different indications. So we're looking at kind of merging some of those things and offering some of the treatments that she offers for wellness and whatnot in her practice, and we're going to be offering some of those things as well in our med spa, which I'm really excited about.
Do you send some of your questionable patients to her before you operate on them?
I haven't. Um, I mean, I've texted her before about to run things by her about patients, but no, I haven't. I haven't actually felt like I've needed to send someone over to her for clearance or anything like that before surgery.
My recommendation there is just listen to your gut, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, listen to your staff and your gut, you
Yeah,
know.
just staff for sure. Staff, gosh,
Yeah,
yeah. My MA, she can pick up on
yeah.
pathology from a mile away.
Women are very good at reading other women
Yes,
typically. So, and a lot of times the women act differently towards you than they do to the staff. So I would say just listen to you and your staff and you should be covered.
totally.
Does your wife analyze you at all?
Oh yeah, every day.
Is that
I
what
just
you're
go home and lay on the couch and let her do her thing. Let her analyze.
That is so great. I love the world of psychiatry. I was going to go to school and I said, should I go to business school or I was thinking about psychiatry or law. And then I thought law is so negative and psychiatry, I don't need to think about that all day. You know, I already think about my psychosis enough. So I thought, no, I'm going to do business. That just seemed to make more
Yeah,
overall sense. Yeah.
it really is fascinating.
Yeah.
What she does is really, really fascinating stuff. And yeah, that was definitely when I was looking at specialties. I knew I wanted to be in surgery, but if I wasn't in surgery, I think psych would definitely be up there for me.
So have you noticed the patient trends or are the patients getting older, younger, or do they want less anesthesia, more anesthesia? Are you noticing any difference?
That's interesting. I think it depends on the surgery. I've noticed facial rejuvenation patients are getting younger.
Mhm.
And I think the reason for that is a lot of people are getting into Botox and fillers and baby Botox and preventive treatments and things like that in their 20s now, right? So they're starting these treatments very early. And then after 10 or 20 years, I think they've become fatigued with those types of treatments, or they've just realized I've achieved what I'm going to be able to achieve with these non-surgical treatments. And they've realized that, okay, the next step for them to see the results they want to see is surgical. So I think I'm seeing more facial rejuvenation patients in their 40s, whereas usually my facelift patients, at least in my training, I was used to seeing patients in their 50s, 60s, and up. So I think those facial rejuvenation patients are getting younger. Um, Regarding body surgeries, I would say it's pretty consistent for us. Our mommy makeovers are generally in their 30s, maybe early 40s. That's probably one of our most popular procedures. And then when it comes to lipo 360s and some of the high definition body contouring, some of the breast augmentations and those types of procedures, those patients are usually in their 20s, late 20s, I would say.
They've gotten so much younger. I never even had Botox until I was 40.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and now I think, "Oh my god, those girls are gonna hate themselves at 40 if they're starting at this at 20 and 25." I
Yeah.
I I mean, they haven't even seen a line yet. Wait a minute,
Yeah.
yeah. Ooh, they are gonna need your wife's help. Yeah.
Kim did Botox on me, I think, like, it was probably 2 years ago when Kim first did Botox on me. For the longest time, I resisted myself, and then after getting my first treatment, my forehead really hasn't moved very much since then. So, I'm hooked.
Well, they do say, Botox is the heroin of our industry, and it's so true. You get a taste of this, and it's just amazing what you can do to your appearance if
Yeah,
you have the time, money, and interest. That's the problem. There's so many choices now that you can
yeah,
fiddle with all of this, and there's some good and bad to that. Yeah.
yeah. True. You can do just about everything. I mean, you can inject pretty much anywhere on the body with Botox. It's pretty neat.
And apparently you can skin tighten everything now. You can do your knees, your legs, your arms. You can just tighten the heck. It's
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, the radio frequency stuff is interesting. It it has its pros and cons. It has its pros and cons. I think it's definitely an area that I think if you wanna be at the cutting edge, you have to have some radiofrequency skin tightening technologies that you offer. But it's not gonna do everything. It's not a substitute to a facelift. It's not a substitute to a neck lift. It's not a substitute to a tummy tuck. I think it'll make your results better. Um, but if a patient needs a tummy tuck, they need a tummy tuck. No amount of Renuvion or radio frequency or in mode or anything is going to change that. I'm sorry. Um, but it is I think really valuable. And I think our with the radio frequency technology that we use something called retraction, which I absolutely love. I think it's made our results from 360 lipo and some of our mommy makeovers. Most of our mommy makeovers are adding that on with their lipo 360, and it's been an absolute game changer.
Nice. As long as you can see results. When Thermage came out a long, long time ago,
Mhm.
first of all, if you could even live through it, it was the most painful experience I've ever had in my entire
Really,
life. And then you had to wait 3 months to find a result that you never really found because you couldn't remember what it was anyway, unless somebody took really good photos of you. It's
right.
like, really, this was expensive. It hurt like a mother. I'm never going to do it again. And I don't think anything happened. So then they came out with another one, and it's getting better and better. But women are and people are really impatient nowadays. It's tough to say to them, "Oh yeah, you're going to see a great result in 3 months." That's tough. So I would give them an IPL, BBL,
Mhm.
microneedling while they're waiting.
Right. True. True. And yeah, and you gotta. I think you also want to think when I have a patient who's in my practice and she's interested in facial rejuvenation, for example, and then she's interested in radio frequency and some of the other technologies, you can do that. But I think the problem is a lot of patients, they'll do radio frequency, they'll get Sculptra, they'll kind of dabble in a lot of these different non-surgical treatments. And when the time comes for them to get a facial rejuvenation procedure, I mean, it's scorched earth in there. The scarring they've created, sometimes those treatments will, damage your subdermal plexus. They will cause atrophy of the subdermal fat. So I think you really have to be cautious about that as a surgeon, and you have to be mindful of those types of changes because that patient who's sitting in your chair right now, who's interested in skin tightening on your neck, she might be in the OR with you in 5 years, and you're just going to be cursing yourself when you run into all that scar tissue on her neck or that sculpture you put in her cheeks a few years earlier.
I hear you. There's nothing easy about this, especially if you started early.
Yeah,
You've tried all sorts of things at that point. I
yeah.
I hear you. Tell me about your just the marketing you did. So here you are 4 years ago. It's during
Mhm.
COVID. No one can even see you because everyone's masked. How in the world did you get patients in there? How did you do it?
Fortunately, I wasn't terribly far from where I started residency. So I was close enough that some of those patients from my resident clinic where I started my residency actually followed me.
No kidding.
And they referred some friends, and it kind of just gradually grew from there. But man, it was slow in the beginning. And before my private practice had ramped up, as I was trying to build up my caseload and get board certification and things like that, I was actually working 2 days a week at Athenics Body Contouring,
Of course.
um, and that was huge for me because it generated a massive amount of volume very early in my practice, got me in front of a lot of patients. So I think you do need something to kind of supplement your cases and help you get on your feet until you build up your own caseload. And that really helped me. For some surgeons, it's going to be taking ER call
Yep.
or doing reconstructive work. But I think once you start doing that, it's really hard to get out of it.
Or they work at Kaiser a couple
Or
I
they
mean,
look at
you're
yeah,
moonlighting somehow because you've gotta figure out the overhead?
yeah. And that's yeah, that's a challenge. So, fortunately today there's so many different options for corporate plastic surgery practices that, we'll hire a young surgeon that, has, done some good work. And that's a great place to get some cases until you've built up your practice, whether it's Sonobello, Phoenix, some of these other places are great, I think, a great place to start things out.
It's just not a great place to build your practice. It's a great place to build your surgical skills,
Yeah,
but otherwise, those patients are theirs unless somehow they stay with you, but anyway, you have to do what you have to do when you get started, but so are
it's
you
tricky.
fully on
Yeah.
your own now?
Yeah, so now I'm full-time in Anaheim Hills, and I see patients, in Ontario as well. So right now, Anaheim Hills in Ontario, and we're gonna move the Anaheim Hills location to Yorba Linda. So we'll now have those 2 locations, Ontario and Yorba Linda, starting next year. But yeah, I probably left at Phoenix, if I'm remembering correctly, it's probably about 18 months was how long I stayed there. And then I left, and yeah, it's been solo from there.
All right, so let's talk about social media because you're definitely on it. You're doing your thing. You're doing a good job of patient education. What's your experience been like, and how much of your own time is it taking?
So we started out with a few different things. We started out with, we did it all in-house, which was incredibly labor intensive, and time consuming. And we had some growth. And then something happened. Instagram changed its algorithm or something in 2021. And um, that really throttled our growth. We basically got to the point where we realized we can't post a before and after anymore on Instagram especially for body procedures. So went back to the drawing board, and our social media presence now is 3 different accounts. One of them is the med spa page. One is the results page, which is a private account. You have to request to follow it. And the others are public facing accounts.
Mhm.
And before and afters go on the private page, med spa content goes on the med spa page. And then our main page at Saba Motakef MD is sort of where we have just more educational content, more informational content, some personal content, things like that. And we try to link some of that to our med spa page and our results page if patients want to see before and afters. Now we're more, I would say, creative with stories. I think you can get away with a bit more on Instagram stories, but if I so much as post a before and after on Instagram, I'll be shadow banned, as they say, within a day.
But there's no rhyme or reason because there's somebody down the street who does it all day long. So that's
Yeah.
what I don't like about this. I don't mind playing the game when I know the rules, but you guys are so held like you're victims. Like you're held ransom. You don't even know what you can do, what you can't do. It just depends on what they decide. And when they take you down, I think it's a great idea to have several accounts, but how labor
Mhm.
intensive is that? Jeez.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, it's very labor intensive. We have full-time in-house social media staff. We have a marketing agency, high key marketing agency that we work with. And they have a whole group of people. So between our in-house staff and high key, we are managing these 3 accounts. And we try to create a bunch of different content and different types of content for each page, because it's not going to work on some of the different pages based on what you're trying to do. So the algorithm sucks. The algorithm keeps changing. I can cry about it all day, or I can just kind of shift, what I do to kind of get around, some of the changes that they've created to the algorithm. And that's what we've tried to do. And I think it's definitely fueled a lot of growth for us in 2024.
When you pull, if you can pull a report of revenues by referral source, do you know where the money comes from? Not the interaction, but the real money. Do you think it's coming from your SEO, your website, mainly Google, your real self? Because you're also doing a good job with reviews. You have like 87 Google reviews, but you have 200 altogether, but some of them are Yelp and some are real self.
Hmm.
But they can also be good SEO triggers too.
Yeah,
So do you
absolutely.
know where the money's coming from?
When I look at cases that are done and I look at where those cases come from, it's kind of split pretty evenly across all of those. And that brings me back to why it's important to do everything. Some of it's Google, but a lot of times when someone says they found you on Google, they Google you because they saw you on Instagram, or because their friend told them about you. So I would say it's Google, Instagram, Yelp is up there, word of mouth. Those are probably the top 4, and it's pretty even. I would say Instagram's probably number 1,
Mm.
even with the changes and the things that we've had to do with our page. I would say Instagram's still number 1, and then probably Google or word of mouth would be a close second, I would
Yeah.
say.
You've actually done a pretty good job on Yelp, and most surgeons can't stand Yelp because it's unforgiving.
Mhm.
You have really good reviews there. Any tips on how you're getting good reviews on all of it? Is there anything in particular you're doing, and how are you getting approvals for the photos as well? Photos and reviews, how are you getting that to happen?
Photos are tricky because, I feel like the last few months, I've had so many patients say no to photos, and I'm pretty hands off. We don't like to pressure patients. If they say no, we respect that. So photos are tough, um, you know, and I don't have a good solution for that. You ask everyone, some are going to say yes, some are going to say no. It is what it is. Obviously, sometimes if they say no, we'll say, why, you're not comfortable with this if there's no way it can be traced back to you or identified. And, if they tell us, yeah, there's a tattoo or a birthmark or something, then we'll blur that, but most of the time when they say no, they just don't want to be up there, period. And we respect that. With reviews, I think every surgeon's been in the situation when they've had a patient and they're at a 2 month or 3 month post-op, and they're sitting there in the room and they're just, you know, so happy with their results, and they're thanking you and they're like, this is amazing, this is life changing. A lot of surgeons have been there. And I think that's when you ask for a review. That's when I say, hey, well, thank you so much. Would you mind sharing that experience? And I don't want them to go and embellish it or, write a novel, but if you could take what you told me and put that online, I would really appreciate that. And that's usually how we do it. And that seems to be the most effective way, I think, to get them. Yelp is tricky. I mean, I've heard some surgeons describe Yelp as an extortion ring, right? Because you get a couple bad reviews, and then it's really hard to distance yourself from that. And then sometimes the good reviews get kind of pushed down, and the bad reviews get pushed up. So fortunately, we haven't had a ton of that. I mean, I've had my fair share of bad reviews myself. I think you just have to uh, get a lot of reviews, and it all averages out. So Yelp has been good. Haven't had an issue with photos on Yelp either. Is that an issue that you've had previous clients struggle with?
Well, only because the patients are complaining and they're showing off their bad reviews or bad results,
Oh, so the patient will show a photo and
patients will
say,
show it there. Yeah.
"Oh wow,
Yeah,
yeah, I know."
and same thing with Reddit, by the way. I would keep an eye on Reddit. They can
Okay.
be your best friend and your worst enemy if a trail of patients get involved. Like, if you ever look at Reddit, because it definitely shows in the rankings. Like, if
Mhm.
you say, oh, like let's say I put in your name in reviews, Reddit will show up if they're bad talking you. You know,
Right,
so
right.
and that's tough because one says something and then everyone starts piling on, and, so anyway, I would just be careful with Reddit. It seems to be kind of a negative site at this point.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, like, not many people around there saying, "Oh, he's the greatest," it's usually, "Let me tell you what he did to me,"
It
and
honestly wasn't even on my radar as a place that people would find, a
it's such a
plastic
big deal.
surgeon, but there's a thriving, community on there. And yeah, a lot of people will go to Reddit to find, it's kind of like what Yelp used to be before it became totally like monetized and everything.
Right,
It's just this like organic online community where people will
totally.
say, okay, where do you go for this or that, Um, it wasn't even on my radar. Honestly, I was when a patient said that, I said, okay, we got to go check that out. Didn't realize that people were finding their surgeons that way.
It wasn't even on my radar, but I'm always on there looking for things, so I said, like, once I was Googling, eh, did have you had a tummy tuck? Boom. Reddit was like number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of
Wow.
the results. And I thought, oh my God. Like
It
the
ranks really high on SEO.
it's huge on SEO
Yeah.
because it's Yelp on steroids, quite
Yeah.
frankly, you know? So
What's going to be really interesting, Catherine, is AI.
yeah,
Because I don't know about you, but these days I use ChatGPT more than I use Google.
it's my
Right.
friend. It's
Eh,
up all the time. It's on my nap bar. Any question I
Yeah.
have, I ask it. I asked it about my Cavapoo because he's not eating right now, and I said he's
Yeah.
so picky, and it gave me like 10 suggestions, and I'm like, "Thank you."
Yeah, exactly. It becomes, a very efficient way to get an answer to a question, um, which is great. But I think the direction things are going, I think patients are going to be asking ChatGPT, who's the best mommy makeover surgeon in Orange County, for example.
Yeah,
So I think we might see a shift in terms of how people are branding and marketing themselves, and maybe they're going to try to cater their brand more towards ranking higher on ChatGPT. I don't know, but I think that will be an interesting shift that we're going to see in the next months, probably next
right?
few months as it explodes.
You're right about the months. It's not years, it's
Yeah,
months. Um,
Seriously.
and I do know you're going to take a hit on your SEO rankings because no one's going to go to Google now and sit through all these websites. They're just going to want a summation. Who is the best? And then
Right.
like try it. AI like I did North Michigan. And my client, thank God, showed up first. But it's because he had really good reviews. He's been around for 20 years. He doesn't have any competition. Like there's a lot that goes into that. So, I think it's a huge game changer, though, for sure.
Something to keep an eye on, that's for sure.
Yeah, I talk a lot about it because I'm just trying to stay in front of it. Like, what can you do? The
Yeah.
best thing you can do is come up with authentic content, and
Mhm.
authentic is video and audio. That's
Right.
the best thing you can do. Your blog posts aren't going to do it because anybody can. AI can write it for you. We all
I
know that.
know.
Also, that we need authenticity. So thank God you like video. Keep doing a lot of it. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
quite
Yeah.
frankly, if you can get your patients to say you're the best, that will count. Because if your patients are saying he's the best he's the best surgeon in Anaheim, if
Yeah.
they could say that, that would really be helpful because AI is just taken, oh, they all say he's the best. Okay, it's this one.
Right.
It's this guy, you know?
Yeah. That's
Oh,
for sure.
so
It's pretty
crazy. All right, tell us something interesting we don't know about you. And as I mentioned to you, I thought it was so cute that you have two Shih Tzus. But then I looked at your Instagram, and since the Shih Tzus, now you have a toddler. So you're a
Yeah.
father. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we had 2 Shih Tzus who were basically like our kids,
Right?
for the longest time, and they still are. And they're 10 years old now. But yeah, we have a toddler. He's 2 years and change. Um, I've been telling a couple patients this because we all, it's Thanksgiving was last weekend, and they've been asking me how was your Thanksgiving. We potty trained over Thanksgiving. When else am I going to have 4 days at home where I can do something like that? So that
And did
was,
it work?
yeah, it was a little chaotic, but it was definitely a Thanksgiving to remember. But yeah, it all worked out. So here we
What's
are.
the Are you, like, ecstatic being a dad? Is it life-changing, I assume?
It's the coolest thing ever. I mean, it really is. It's exhausting at times. There's no question about that. But it's got to be the coolest thing ever. And yeah, my wife and I are talking about another, but with the building and all the other things we're doing, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that in the next year or so. But maybe next time we sit down for a podcast, I'll have an update for you.
You'll be a family of 4 or 5. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
plus the
Yeah,
Shih Tzus.
right. All right, so if people wanted to get a hold of you, your website is Saba Motakef, MD.com.
Correct.
Why
Yeah.
don't you say it?
SabaMotakefMD.com.
Gotcha. Okay, and is there any other way they can get a hold of you via email or Instagram?
Yeah, you can email me sabamotakefmd@gmail.com or Instagram @sabamotakefmd.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure getting to know you better. I'll be watching you online, and now hopefully I'll see you in AI.
Yeah,
And yeah. So
we'll see.
yeah, and good luck with the build out. That's a big deal.
Yeah, really excited about that. Thank
Wow.
you.
Yeah. All right, everybody, that wraps it up for us today. If you've got any questions for me, you can leave them on my website at catherinemaley.com. I also offer a growth strategy review session if you don't know where to start with your practice or you don't know where the spots are that you're missing out on. I'm really good at IDing that for you. Also, if you would subscribe to Beauty and the Biz, that's super helpful when growing the audience. And then if you have any questions or feedback, you can certainly DM me at Instagram at Catherine Maley MBA. And with that, I will say thank you so much, and we will talk again soon.
The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want, but you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.